Well, we have learned all the techniques for factoring. So we went over factoring out a common factor. We talked about how to factor a quadratic polynomial of the form x squared plus bx plus c, meaning the number in front of x squared is 1. Then we talked about how to factor ax squared plus bx plus c, where the number in front of x squared is something other than 1. And we've also talked about factoring by grouping and special forms. So now we're going to put it all together in one last video. We're going to talk about the general strategy for factoring any polynomial. Number 1, in most cases, it is beneficial to write a polynomial in standard form before beginning the factoring process. That means you want to rearrange the terms if necessary so that the powers of x decrease as you move from left to right. Number 2, and this is big, you always want to look for a common factor first. If a polynomial has a common factor, you want to always factor that out first and then write what's left. Number 3, if there is no common factor, or if the common factor has already been factored out, check to see if you're left with something that further requires factoring. Maybe one of the factors that's left is of the form x squared plus bx plus c, and then you would follow that technique. Or maybe you've got an ax squared plus bx plus c, and then you would follow that particular technique. Or maybe you've got a special form. So at that point, you're checking each factor. Okay, can it be factored further? You would apply the appropriate rule. Okay. Another thing to consider in number 4 is if you do have something with 4 terms, apply factoring by grouping. Okay. Last thing, always factor completely, meaning you need to factor the polynomial until no factors further. Okay. All right, so we're going to try 3 of these. We're going to try to factor each polynomial completely in example 6. So we're going to start with 6x squared minus 54. Okay. Immediately you might think, hey, this is a difference of squares. But there is nothing that you can square to get 54. So this is not a difference of squares. However, you can look for a common factor. That's actually where you should always start. Okay. So when I look at this, each piece you can take out a 6 because this is really 6x squared minus 6 times 9. 6 times 9 gives you 54. So you can go ahead and take out a 6. That is going to leave you with x squared minus 9. Okay. So now we need to see if anything else factors. Well, the 6 is definitely not going to factor. It's just a number. However, what has popped up in the other factor is a difference of squares because I'm subtracting, and then the square root of x squared is x and the square root of 9 is 3. So we can factor x squared minus 9 as a difference of squares. Okay. We need to leave the 6 out front. It doesn't just disappear. So let's do our difference of squares. It's going to break down into something times something. Order matters here. So the square root of x squared is x. That goes on the left. Square root of 9 is 3. That goes on the right. And then the signs need to be one of each. Okay. And then if you check again, x plus 3 does not factor further. Neither does x minus 3. So here is your answer. We are completely factored. All right, in part B, something to notice, this polynomial is not written in standard form, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and rearrange the terms so that we write it from left to right with descending powers of x, okay? So the negative x squared goes first, then the positive 6x. Then the positive 16. You want to make sure when you move terms around that you keep each sign with the term. Okay. All right, so this is what we're working with. We've got negative x squared plus 6x plus 16. Now we can attempt to factor it. Always check for a common factor first. At first glance, you may not think that there is one. You can definitely not pull out an x because the 16 doesn't have an x, and you may not see a number in common. However, we have talked about if your leading term, which is the first number out front, if that is negative, you want to pull out a negative sign. Okay, so I'm going to pull out a negative sign. That essentially is going to change the sign of everybody. So this is going to be positive x squared minus 6x minus 16. Okay, so why I did that, I'm just going to check myself at this point. Negative times positive will give you negative x squared. Negative times negative will give you positive 6x. And then negative times negative will give you positive 16. Okay, so factoring out a negative just changes the sign of every term. Okay, we have to factor completely. So now we need to look at whether the x squared minus 6x minus 16 factors. Okay, leave the minus sign out front. Let's try to break this down. Okay, this is going to be the x squared plus bx plus c format. Okay, so we need two numbers, and signs are important. They need to multiply to be negative 16. They need to add up to negative 6. Okay, so what two numbers do that? It's going to be negative 8 and positive 2. Okay, if I multiply these guys together, negative 8 times positive 2, I'm going to get the negative 16. And then if I add them, negative 8 plus positive 2 is going to give me the negative 6. Okay, so these are the two numbers that we use right here to factor our polynomial. Okay, we can just write it down. Okay, the x squared will break down into x times x, and then use those two numbers. So minus 8 and positive 2. Again, it does not matter which one goes first. Okay, you cannot factor any more. The x minus 8 will not break down, neither will the x plus 2. So here is your polynomial factored completely. All right, last one. We've got x to the fourth minus 4x cubed plus x squared minus 4x. Immediately, I see four terms. So let's go ahead and group. Okay, I'm going to group these two together, and I'm going to put these two guys together. We're going to go to each pair, take out what's in common. Okay, so for the x to the fourth minus 4x cubed, I can remove an x cubed. So what's going to be left? It's going to be x minus 4. And then you want to keep that plus sign in the middle here. All right, and then for x squared minus 4x, you can take out an x. That's going to leave you with x minus 4. Okay, so now that causes, on either side of the plus sign, that causes a common factor of x minus 4 to pop up. So we're going to take that out, and then we can write what's left. Okay, we will be left with if you take out the x minus 4 from the first piece, you're going to get x cubed left, and then you need to take out the x minus 4 from the other side. That will leave you a plus with plus x. Okay, we need to make sure we are done. Okay, x minus 4 will not factor any further. However, you can factor x cubed plus x. Okay, these two guys have a common factor of x. Okay, so I'm going to leave the x minus 4, and then I'm going to pull out an x. Okay, and that's going to leave me with x squared plus 1. Okay, so if I check it here, this is going to be x cubed plus x. All right, so that brings us to here. X minus 4 does not factor any further, neither does x. X squared plus 1 is a sum of squares, so it's not going to factor. Okay, you can leave it like this. If you wish, you can put the x out front. When you multiply things, you can multiply in any order. Okay, so here is our final answer. Okay, This particular question, I started by grouping because I saw the 4 terms. You could have also pulled out a common factor first of x. Okay, it would have worked out the same way. You could have pulled out the x first, and then you still would have had 4 terms left to group. All right, so anytime you are factoring a polynomial, make sure you follow this general strategy for factoring a polynomial.